Iran hanged 75% more people in 2022 than the previous years, two rights groups have said, denouncing an execution machine aimed at spreading fear as protests shook the country. The figure of at least 582 executions was the highest since 2015 in Iran and well above the figure of 333 in 2021. The report by Norway-based Iran Human Rights and Paris-based Together Against the Death Penalty said last year was marked by the eruption in September of nationwide protests sparked by the death of Mahsa Amini. According to the reports now emerging, over 50% of executions in 2022 were of the anti-hijab protesters. Major Mohammed Ali Shah, defense expert, is with us on the broadcast. Major Shah, what can be read into these startling numbers emerging of the situation within Iran?
It's indeed very, very disturbing and alarming there. It is really very sad. Since 2015 to now, as you rightly said, 580 something, figure that is ridiculous. That is 71. And it says, many of the executions are happening secretly, like they will not declare it. And people only get to know through their lawyers, through their family members, through the sources, through the in-prison worker that such a thing has happened. Now, it says there was a report by the International Human Rights and where they mentioned that only 71 of the executions were recorded last year. They were announced by official sources. The rest of them, apart from the 71 of them, were unannounced, which means people had no clue. Now, according to this report, also there were 288, which means that 49% of those who were put to death were convicted of murder. So, see, in countries like there are certain countries which follow the Sharia law, like even in Saudi Arabia for that matter, murder, drugs, and rape. They are very, very strict about it, and they straight away put you to death. Fine, but then when you are sentencing anyone to a death penalty, you got to declare it, right? You cannot just blindly. Then it's as absolutely like disappearing. You make the person disappear. Now there were another 256 people. That's 44%, including 3 women. They were executed after being convicted of drug-related charges from 126 in 2021. That rose to 10 times higher in 2020. That's just not even 3 years back, in fact. The report that warned that the significant reduction of the number of drug-related executions that came as a result of a 2017 amendment. So they amended it in 2017 to from the anti-narcotics law. Now the very fact that they want to obviously create the fear psychosis in the people, because there are a lot of people who are protesting in Iran. So now there were 2 young boys who were hung. Now this year, especially, they started the new year with hanging two new executions. There are protests happening in Lebanon. There are protests happening in different parts of the world. Now, April last year, yes, was the only which they considered as an achievement. That April last year saw very few executions. Otherwise, it became like an execution machine. That, oh, you go to hell straight away. It's really ridiculous and it's painful over there, because what I was taught as a child was, even by clerics, in fact, they say that, zindagi dena or lena to keval khuda ke haath mein hai. No one has the right to take away life like that. So they want to unjustifiably, unduly put the fear psychosis, because there are too many anti-government protests and the government over there is rattled. So they do not know what to do. That's the best way for them to handle it, they think, is putting them to sleep. But I think it's really, really painful, utterly ridiculous, and it will give a further uproar in Iran. If they're thinking they will calm people down, they will shut their mouth. No, they will not. The people of Iran have woken up, the women, and I stand with my sisters of Iran. Things have been imposed on them for too long. आप किसी को कब तक बांध के रखोगे? Ultimately, like a volcano also will erupt after a while. It will keep absorbing and ultimately erupt. In Hindi, if I have to give this thing, in a very crude this thing, that you cannot, even a horse for that matter, or any animal, you cannot keep it tied for too long. Ultimately, ek sand bhi toot ke bhagega bhaiya. So it is not an analogy, I'm comparing it to a sand, but I'm trying to tell that people in Iran have been suppressed for far too long, and the government over there is not understanding. They are still trying to suppress them by giving out these death penalties. The figures are actually alarming. When I was going through the data, I was like, oh my goodness, it's only rising and rising and rising. Now, okay, another small thing I'll conclude by this over there. See, when you're giving a very strict punishment, a corporal punishment, capital punishment, or whatever punishment you're giving, a death penalty. What should happen logically? Why in a country in Saudi Arabia, the crime rate is low actually? Why? Because the laws are so strict, right? They'll cut off your hand if you steal. In Saudi Arabia, I'm comparing. Now, in Iran, the death penalties are rising, which means people are not learning the lesson even after getting a death penalty, or something is definitely going wrong with the government decision. Which of them is right? Obviously, what I perceive it as the government's policy, their way of executing is not right. The way they are giving punishments after punishment, and it's only rising. It's not ending. It should have actually come down because the punishment are so severe. So if you are not punishing people for the lawful, most ridiculous, enemy of the God. Iran executed some people by saying you are enemy of the God.
Yes.
I mean, it's a most ridiculous thing that's happening over there. So I think they should do a self-introspection on that.
Major Shah, thank you very much for joining us.